professor of social and political theory in Chicano and Chicana studies and feminist studies at UCSB. You see she's got a PhD from Harvard, MA from Cambridge, qualified. I was struck by what she emphasizes in her teaching: theories of social change, social movements, and democratic theory. It's like, how does social change happen? What makes democratic movements work or not work? And I think she's just a fabulous source for helping us understand those things more. Something that she said that I really liked, I'm just going to quote: "Our aim is to support grassroots democracy in all of its many forms, and to thereby foster the voice and influence of everyday people, as we seek in common to answer democracy's oldest and most central question: how shall we live together?"
My name is Ewina Barvosa, and it is true that I'm a political scientist, and it is true that I'm an associate professor at UC Santa Barbara. But I think my real qualification for being here with you today is the fact that I've been a student of social change from the earliest days of my life. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, where my parents had fled from South Texas in order to avoid raising me. Yeah, no, it's true. I was actually born in Albuquerque because my mom was too far along to really get the whole way, and they eventually got to Oregon. But they didn't want to raise me and my brother, who would come along a few years after me, and around the bigotries that run so deep in the Texas borderlands. My dad was born in Mexico in 1919, so he's 93 now. And he grew up in Southwest Texas in a place that's not even on the map any longer, between Eagle Pass and Crystal City. My father lived through the hardships of Jim Crow segregation, the poverty of the Great Depression, and as a young man, he fought fascism in the Second World War. When I was a child, my father would tell me these amazing stories, stories of laughter and ingenuity and joy, even amid the ravages of racism and poverty. I wondered as a small child, sitting there listening to him, why things stayed the same. Why people like my father, even then, in my child's experience, could work so hard and yet be paid so little. It was then and there, at the dinner table, that my quest to understand social change began. Now, many decades later, I am still a student of social change and also of democracy. In fact, as efforts of social change go, the campaign for meaningful democracy has perhaps been the longest campaign in our history. From its very earliest beginnings, perhaps even before the democracy that arose over 2 millennia ago in ancient Athens, democracy has been on one hand revered and on the other hand doubted. For those who first fought for and treasured democracy in ancient Athens, democracy was a means by which all people of the society could have a voice. It was a way in which all, I should say that all at that time meant a fairly narrow group of people, but nevertheless there was a sense of all who counted, could gather together in the agora, 6,000 people at a minimum, to decide collectively, face to face, how they should live together as one people. By our late modern times, of course, democracy has long come to refer to something quite different. Today, democracy to most of us means electing a small handful of people, typically people who are economic or social elites, to decide for the whole. They decide, authorized by the official power of the people to govern, by us to govern, although in so many ways we do not. As the story is told, of course, the shift from direct voice of all people in democracy to representative governance by a handful of elites is a necessary result of the size of our societies. Beyond ancient times, societies have long been too large to gather people en masse to decide collectively how we should live together. But there's always more to the story. From the beginning, while democracy's champions wrote poems of praise, democracy's skeptics offered us mostly doubt. Most outstanding of those skeptical doubts has been doubts about you and me. Doubts about us, all of us, as average people, supposedly able to take part in the collective self-governance of democracy. For example, in his Socratic dialogues, the ancient Greek philosopher Plato offered the view that given the chance to self-govern democratically, we would generally fail. We would fail to act wisely. We would fail to judge carefully enough to govern ourselves well. In general, we would be, on the whole, too selfish, too stingy, too mean toward others, too weak toward what is right, to decide how to live well together. Worse yet, according to Plato's dialogues, even if we could find it in ourselves to be wise and effective democratic citizens, democracy itself is very fragile. Democracy is easily preyed upon. It always faces the threatening rise of abusive or arbitrary power, in which few become able to decide for the many, at great cost to all, but to the few themselves. I will say that the first time I read Plato as an undergraduate, I took it and I threw the book across the room. I said, no, I just disagree. But all of us, of course, have to decide for ourselves to consider how prophetic Plato's dialogues may have been about the vulnerabilities and the potential fate of later democracies. What I want to do for the few minutes allotted to me today is to consider not Plato's potential prophecy, but to welcome the possibilities of Common VC, the countywide community organizing network site that we are launching today, by pointing out how much of Plato's doubts about us are so often misplaced. At least they are very wrong when applied to people like you. For you, all of you, have committed yourselves to making the world a better place. You have taken the opportunities that are open to you and created new opportunities to do what Plato doubted that we would. You have acted wisely and well for the good of the whole. You have sought to answer the question, how shall we live together, with words like these? We shall live together with dignity, with justice, with equality and fairness, with our basic needs met, with fair pay and fair play, with freedom to live and to love who and how we wish without harm, with concern for the well-being of our fellow human beings, whatever their language, whatever their faith, whatever their place of birth, whatever the documents in their wallet. But we know too, you know too, that however active you have been and continue to be in your quest for justice until this day, there is still much more to be done. There are many wrongs that still need to be made right, many dilemmas and hardships to be negotiated and resolved. And we know that alone or in small, isolated groups, we can accomplish something important. But that what we can accomplish alone or scattered throughout Ventura County is much less than what we can accomplish if we work together. Power in numbers is not a cliche. It is a historical fact. It has been proven by historical example again and again and again. The more we collaborate together for change, the more that change can and will become a reality. And yet, of course, this collaboration is harder than we think, or at least it's harder than we hope. And this is where the doubts of the Platonic dialogues are not entirely unfounded. We are, all of us, creatures of habit. We do have our comfort zones. We are not always readily at ease with those who are unfamiliar to us, or easily comfortable in the ways and means of newcomers to us are new in our experience. So we often stay where we are, doing our piece, yes, but not always venturing forth into the wider world, or running the risks that we would run if we were to search for and find those who are willing to work with us, shoulder to shoulder, together in a common journey to make a better world. And yet, for major change to happen, our move into the wider world is essential. Countless are the local campaigns that make a small ripple in a nearby pond. But few of those campaigns, there are a few, that spread out into lasting efforts that have been seen and felt from afar with major and lasting effects. And some of you have headed some of those efforts. Those larger and more lasting efforts for social change all share 3 ingredients. The first ingredient is a self-organization of a broad network of people. In each historical case, people are self-knit. We bind ourselves into collectives that can be moved strategically and nimbly, en masse, and at will. The second ingredient that we always find in larger successful movements is the cooperation of a diversity of people in the network who bring their different strengths, their diverse energies to the causes, often in very simple ways. Here, the compound energies and pressures of many simple acts of everyday people make all the difference. Heroes sometimes have a place, but they are not the crux of the matter ever when we look historically. For without the many taking part in many ways, large and small, the one can achieve only little. And the third ingredient is the vision of those who are working in collaboration regarding what they wish to achieve. In democracies where justice is not a given, and there are many, movements for social change that work toward justice require all 3 of these ingredients. So important, so timeless is this fact that as human beings in many ways, and often especially as Americans, I think, we seek out epic stories to remind us of these truths. If you look closely in America, and other nations as well, nearly all of our most popular epic tales are tales of justice. They are stories of the struggles of everyday people to overcome the banal or the grandiose evils that have presented themselves. Think about it, Harry Potter, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, all of these are stories of the restoration of justice. And the most striking thing about these stories, well, that's right, you know where I'm going. The most striking thing to me about these stories, there are heroes and their heroes play a role, but it's the simple actions of many everyday people that always makes all the difference. It's in these stories that we are reminded, all of us seeking courage to work beyond our comfort zone. It's in these stories that we can and do remind ourselves that we need to break away from home sometimes to gather with others in common cause, whether or not we will be the most direct beneficiaries of our own quest for justice. The most recent mass retelling, of course, of this story of inspiration and courage is This Fall's the Hobbit, told to millions of people worldwide just a few months ago. In this retelling of Tolkien's classic tale, we hear perhaps the echoes of our resistance to the Platonic critiques of our supposedly selfish and home-bodied ways. When he is asked why he has missed the chance to go home after a harrowing escape from danger, in the screenplay, Bilbo Baggins replies, "I know that you doubt me. I know that you always have." And you're right, I miss Bag End. I miss my books, and my armchair, and my garden. You see, that's where I belong. And that's why I've come back. Because you don't have one. You don't have a home where you belong. It was taken from you. but I will help you take it back if I can. Not unlike all of you working to help others take back what has been taken from them. And even before this scene in the screenplay, it is Gandalf, the wise sage, who describes how modest deeds are the soul of social change. Gandalf says, "Some believe that it is only great power that can hold evil in check, but that is not what I have found. I have found it is the small things, the everyday deeds of ordinary folks, that keeps the shadows at bay. Simple acts of kindness and love." The countywide networking tool called Common VC that we launched today is a chance to leave home, to venture out into the world beyond our present circle without going too far from our garden or our books. From your very own armchair, you can, if enough people take part, search your own county for others who work for the common good in ways similar to yours. Through Common VC, you will be able to get to know each other's work and the work of those with whom you have not met, to find out what others around you are doing, to learn what they do, to encounter what interests them, and to convey what you can offer and what they can offer you as you work together in mutual aid. And of course, in creating a database of each other's contact information, you will all know exactly whose hobbit hole is whose, countywide. And in finding each other and networking ourselves in this way, we will meet the first of the 3 criteria that all successful large-scale efforts for social change share. In taking the first of those 3 steps, we will have increased the likelihood of moving on to the second 2 characteristics. The characteristics of having a diverse people join in common cause, coming together in actions great and small that make the world a better place in the ways that we envision together. The initiative Just Democracy that I've recently founded is dedicated to assisting you with resources for your continued journey, the journey of creating social change in Ventura County. In offering that support and resource, I would be happy to share insights beyond what we can begin to convey in a short 30 minutes today. What we can canvas here today, we can canvas only a small fraction of what there is to consider with regard to social change, and yet there's so many things, so many pieces to the large puzzle. There's so much history to consider from which to learn, so many challenges and dilemmas to navigate. The possibilities are almost endless. We could, for example, consider the many forms of interrelated action that people continually use to apply pressure for change, the institutional processes with which we're most familiar, electoral systems, courts, governing bureaucracies, but beyond those things to institutional processes that are extra-institutional, alternative programming, which many of you do so well, traditional efforts of direct action, boycotts, sit-ins, marches, but also the cultural processes, counter-discourses, art, literature, film, investigative journalism, satire, political and social critique. All of these things are modes for producing food for thought, for thinking and acting critically for the betterment of our lives together. We could think about the meanings and promises of democracy, the direct, deliberative democratic tradition, and the typical ways that democracy gets derailed. We could think about the structural sources of systematic inequalities, the social and cultural processes by which exclusions and hierarchies and inequalities are constructed and sustained. If we wanted to, we could think about identities and the role of identities in shaping social life, the sources of courage that people find. We can think about the internalized biases that operate unconsciously in nearly anyone and everyone raised in a historic and hierarchically ordered society like ours. And from there, if we wanted to, we could focus on careful framing of our messages. For it is in framing we either activate the biases that people have, or we sidestep those biases and tap the better part of them. We could consider, too, how to build social movement identities to make the most of the values that are powerful in our communities, the powerful tradition of direct nonviolent action, philosophies of civil disobedience, freedom, and we could review the ever-present risks of abuse of power that emerge in once democratic societies. And so we could go on indefinitely, but we won't, because today is a day to hold off on those possible conversations and to concentrate on the inspiration that you have brought to this community. Those of you who were at the social justice event, the 100% Summit last January, you articulated that the most important thing, the most important need, was to find a way to network yourselves. You can see from these quotations and on the walls around you that many of the attendees thought this was incredibly important. Let's create a dynamic, interactive database of what we are doing and what we can all use, that we can all use as a tool for collaboration. Let's create a database of participants with their areas of interest and expertise. Let's create a listserv to put out calls for resources. Let's increase awareness of groups doing similar work to pool resources, collaborate, support each other's efforts. Realizing our networks, we need to bring them together and focus our needs. Network, network, network. And so we have responded to this call. In the online networking tool, the instrument of collaboration that I offer you for your use is offered through justdemocracy.com, where Common VC, which stands for Community Organizing Network for Ventura County, is hosted. The workshop portion of this event later this morning will show those of you who are interested how to register, how to build your on-site networking member page, and how to start using Common VC website for your purposes. There's a common calendar for the countywide, there's a bulletin board, discussion groups, there's a lot of facilities on the site, all of which you can use to meet your own purposes and also to meet the overall purpose of networking the entire county. But before we move to that, the Social Justice Fund has created an opportunity for us to all pause and to speak together for a moment, to reflect upon what it would mean for us individually and collectively to start organizing ourselves into a countywide community network. The breakout session that will begin in a few moments will give you a chance to ask yourself several questions. What would you seek from such a community organizing effort? What offerings would you bring to the causes that other members might undertake? And finally, if we can successfully network ourselves throughout the county, what would you imagine for us? What would be your vision of possible futures for us all? Thank you.